Maybe you have all this process, and this is what we used to do. We used to have all this process behind the scenes and never show it to anyone. Hi creatives, and welcome back to Agency Academy. We talk about how to build a business that works for you, so you have more freedom to create and do the things that you love. Today we're going to be talking about a funny topic, which is how to deal with those scenarios when clients are talking about, oh, I know it when I see it, or they're giving very vague instructions like, make it pop. So I wanted to talk about first why it happens, and then what you can do to prevent them and deal with them. You've probably experienced it as well when clients are being super indecisive, they're giving really vague instructions, and it's just really, really difficult because you end up spending way too much time with iterations and trying to figure out what it is that your client means. I think it comes down to two different reasons that this actually happens. The first one is language, and the second one is trust. So I'm going to be talking about these a little bit one at a time and talk about why it happens and how to avoid it. So when I say language, what I mean is that you as a creative, you actually know everything. You know the terminology, you know what makes a good design, you know how to describe what makes a good design. And this is something that you've gotten from a lot of experience. And your client probably doesn't have that unless they're also a creative. And so that makes it really difficult for them to explain exactly what they mean. Maybe they have a personal preference, maybe they have a previous experience of something that is influencing the way that they're thinking about the work that you're presenting. And I think because clients might not always have the words to describe things, if they're not sure how to explain it, they might actually resort to saying, oh, can you just show me these different options, or try to basically micromanage the situation because they're not feeling quite comfortable in explaining what it is that they want, so they'd rather know it when they see it. And so one thing you can do to actually make this a lot less common is to make sure that you're giving your clients an in on what these different terms mean, basically giving them the language. So if you're talking about, let's say, doing a logotype, maybe you can explain, okay, this is what a word mark is, this is what, an icon is, this is what we mean when we say responsive logo. And so that way they're learning the different terms, so you're talking about the same thing. And also, it's very easy for them to feel engaged and like they're learning, and it's not intimidating, like they should be knowing these terms, because you're teaching them as you go. That's your role in the project, and you're showing your expertise. I think it's also really important if you see their eyes start to glaze over, or if they look a little bit confused, or if you're noticing that they're having a hard time explaining what they mean, it's important to help them try to define those words. So if they're saying, I think the logo looks too big, can you make it smaller, for example? Then maybe you can say, okay, is it the contrast between the text and the logo, or is it maybe this color that feels very bold and therefore the logo should be smaller? So try to talk about words that are helpful to you and see and check in with them if that's what they mean. And if it's not, they'll tell you, and that's helpful too. And so the next factor, which is a reason that people sometimes ask for way too many revisions or try to micromanage situations, tend to be trust. And I think this comes down to, like, some clients, they are very involved in their business, especially if it's a smaller business. I find, they are used to putting their hands on everything, and now they've hired you because they know they need an expert, but they're still so invested in the project that they often want to be involved in the process. And I think that's really good. That's important because they have so much important information about their business that you could never be aware of if they don't tell you about it. But what we need to do is to give them the space to do this in the right format and in the right stages of the process. I think the easiest way to make sure that you build trust is to show that you have a really well-defined process that has worked in the past. And so by showing your client, even before you start designing anything or start working on anything, you're showing them these are the different steps we're going through. This is when we're, let's say, looking at competitors, and this is when we're doing our research, coming up with concepts. It's very reassuring to know that it's not, oh, I ask you for a logo and then plop, here's the logo. Because that feels very scary. Like, where did this logo come from? How do we know that it's good? And so maybe you have all this process, and this is what we used to do. We used to have all this process behind the scenes and never show it to anyone. So clients would be questioning like, oh, but what if you did this drop in this color instead? Or what if you did the design in using this typeface instead? Maybe we already tried that, but we never showed them that we have a process to come up with these things. And so once we started to actually show them exactly what went on behind the scenes, not only did we build trust, but because we put some of it already in our proposal, we actually had clients pick us over other agencies specifically because they said, oh, it was so clear what would happen and we really trust you because of the process. So that really would be a tip from me. So for the parts when you want them to be involved, make sure that you're giving them really clear instructions on what it is that you're looking for from them. So if you're asking for, let's say, feedback on, let's say, a typeface, then instead of just saying, what do you think of the typeface, which is maybe what a lot of us do, that opens it up to any interpretation and opinions and all these different things that we kind of want to keep out of it. So instead, maybe you can say, okay, so now that we know we want to create this feeling that we talked about in the discovery, how do we feel like this typeface that we picked is achieving that? Or even better, between these two concepts that we have, which one do you think is doing the best job? And that way it becomes really easy for your client to give feedback because they have something that they're comparing it to, and they have something that they're trying to achieve. They have a clear goal. And sometimes you're still getting a little bit of a vague feedback. Like they might say, oh, I don't know about this one. Maybe it feels wrong for us. And that's a great point to start asking good questions. So if it feels wrong, what about it feels wrong? Is it too bold or is it too delicate? Would you like more or less detail in the typeface, for example? And I think also something you can do, which it works well if you have a client that really has a hard time expressing in a sort of useful, helpful design language what they mean. Look at comparing and contrasting things. So you can either have prepared examples, like if you have a mood board or stylescapes, and you can go to them and look and say, okay, well, this is a really bold typeface. This is a much more muted typeface or more delicate one, for example, and say, where on the spectrum do we prefer it to be? Or you can even, let's say, open up Pinterest and look at some different ones together and see if there's anything there that is drawing their eye or that is working for them or is describing what it is that they're trying to say. If you're noticing that they're picking out like completely widely different options, that's a good opportunity to actually tell them that. You can say, okay, well, I'm noticing that you're picking out options that are kind of opposing. And so what is the common thread that's connecting these two or these three? And saying, okay, well, maybe it is that you really like the color, or let's say maybe they feel very handmade and not very rigid or digital, for example. So trying to pinpoint those things that your client is trying to say in a way that is helpful to them and reiterating it back to them. I think the absolute biggest takeaway is to not do any more design work until you have agreed with your client that you've understood exactly what it is that they're looking for. I used to jump way too fast into revisions because I just wanted to make sure they had a design that they loved. And I spent way too much time on iterations and different versions, when actually it would have just taken me a little bit of extra time up front to make sure I've understood everything, but it would have saved me a ton of time on revisions. So I know it can feel like a lot of work that you have to put into upfront, but it also becomes kind of like a second nature, and you know how to ask the right questions and make sure that you understand what it is that your client means. A big bonus of this is also that if you have people coming back into your business, like repeat clients or on retainers, you only have to establish this design language once, because once they know what you're talking about and how you prefer to receive feedback, they will do that every time. And so that's really, really helpful and a great way to create your dream clients. Thank you so much for watching. If you feel like this video was helpful, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the video if you like. It really, really helps us and it makes us very happy. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Good luck with your projects.